The crystal glasses clinked and candles flickered as my father stood at the head of the dining room table on Christmas Eve. The room looked beautiful. Pine garlands along the fireplace. Silver plates catching the candlelight. 32 family members seated around a table that had been in our family for 3 generations. I had no idea it would be the last Christmas I would ever sit there as my father's daughter. He cleared his throat and raised his glass. I felt warmth rise in my chest. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe after 40 years of feeling invisible, he would finally say something kind about me. Instead, he reached for an envelope and handed it to our family lawyer, Mr. Crane, who had arrived claiming there was an important announcement. The room went quiet. Mr. Crane unfolded the document and read in a flat, professional voice. Every asset, every property, the family business, the beach house, the investment accounts, everything going to one person. Not me, my adopted brother, Adrian Vale.
Before we dive in, drop a comment right now. Hit the like button, and if you are new here, please subscribe. Tell me where in the world you're watching from, what time is it there, and what's the weather like? I love knowing who's in this room with me tonight. Because this story, wait till the end.
The room erupted. Applause. Laughter. My cousin leaned over and whispered to her husband. Someone muttered, "Guess the princess finally got what she deserved." My father did not look at me with sadness. He looked at me with amusement. Then he raised his glass toward Adrian and laughed. And in that moment, something inside me went completely still. Because sitting quietly inside my purse was something that could destroy them all. The applause kept going for what felt like forever. I sat completely still, hands flat on the table, face burning hot. People were hugging Adrian, patting his back. My aunt was dabbing tears from her eyes like she had just witnessed something beautiful. Adrian stood tall in the middle of it all, accepting every handshake like a man who had planned this moment for years. Maybe he had. My father made a little speech about loyalty and legacy. He talked about how a man's true heir is not always born to him, but the one who proves himself worthy. He never once looked my way. When the speech ended, Adrian caught my eye from across the table. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice so only I could hear. "Relax, Olivia," he said quietly. "You were never meant to win." The words landed like a cold hand on the back of my neck. He was not surprised, not apologetic. He said it with the calm confidence of someone who had known the outcome long before tonight. I smiled back at him slowly, because the thing about people who believe they have already won is that they stop watching for danger. Adrian thought this night was the end of the story. He had no idea it was only the beginning, and the secret inside my purse had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. I drove home that night in complete silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the dark road and the sound of my own breathing. I had spent 40 years trying to understand my place in the Hartwell family. The answer had always been the same. I was the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions, the one who never fit the picture my father wanted to present to the world. My brother Daniel had died when I was 7. After that, something inside my father changed. He became harder, more distant. When he brought Adrian home years later, he introduced him as an adopted son in need of a family. I was 19. I tried to welcome Adrian warmly. He smiled in front of my parents and whispered cruel things the moment they left the room. Every mistake in our house became my fault. Every achievement became Adrian's victory. When I graduated top of my business class, my father nodded politely. When Adrian earned a single promotion, my father threw a dinner party. I told myself it was grief, that my father still carried the loss of Daniel and needed to pour his love somewhere. But Christmas Eve proved something different. This was not grief. This was a deliberate choice. I had been chosen to be the family scapegoat my entire life. What none of them knew was that I had quietly been collecting receipts. For years, 10 years before that Christmas dinner, I had been working late in my father's company office. I was head of finance then, trusted enough to handle the books, but never trusted enough to know everything. It was a Thursday evening in November. Most staff had gone home. I was closing out quarterly files when I found a folder tucked inside a misfiled cabinet drawer. The label on the front read simply, Vale Settlement. I should have put it back. I knew that even then. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a record of a financial transfer worth $2.4 million. The payment had been sent from my father's personal account to a law firm I did not recognize. The date on the transfer was 3 years before my father ever claimed to have met Adrian. 3 years before the adoption story he had told every relative, every journalist, every charity gala guest who had ever complimented him on his generous heart. My father always said he had found Adrian through a children's charity, that the boy had been struggling and he had opened his home out of pure kindness. But a $2.4 million settlement dated 3 years earlier told a very different story. A settlement with whom? For what? My hands were cold as I closed the folder. I did not confront my father that night. I made a copy of every single page. Then I filed the folder exactly where I found it and went home. Something was buried in this family, and I had just touched the edge of it. I made a mistake 2 weeks after finding the folder. I brought it up, not aggressively, not loudly. I chose a quiet Sunday morning when only my father and I sat at the breakfast table. I kept my voice steady. I told him I had found paperwork in the office and asked about the Vale settlement. The reaction was immediate and frightening. He did not ask what I meant. He did not look confused. He exploded. He called me jealous. He said I had been snooping through private records to sabotage the family. He told me I had always had a problem accepting Adrian, and that this proved every concern he had ever held about my character. By that evening, he had called my aunt, my uncle, and 2 cousins and given them his version of events. Within days, the family had a new story about me. I was the bitter daughter trying to dig up dirt on her own brother. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody questioned my father. That was the moment I truly understood the power my father held inside the Hartwell family. He did not need evidence to control the story. He only needed to speak first and speak loudly. I said nothing more about the folder, but I did not destroy my copy. I took it home that same night, sealed it in a waterproof envelope, and stored it somewhere no one would ever find it, because something told me that one day that document would matter very much. My father had spent decades building a polished image, the respected businessman, the generous community leader, the loving patriarch who had opened his home to a child in need. It was a beautiful picture. It was also mostly fiction. I began to notice the cracks about 6 years before the Christmas dinner. Small things at first. Expenses that did not match income reports. Vendor invoices that appeared twice under different names. A charity account connected to the company that moved large sums of money every quarter, but showed very little actual charitable activity. As head of finance, I had seen enough numbers to know when something was being deliberately hidden. Money was disappearing from the Hartwell Group. Not small amounts. Millions. The method was careful. Layered. Whoever was behind it understood accounting well enough to make the trail look almost clean. But the patterns were there for anyone who knew where to look. I built a private file over 18 months. Printed transaction records. Photographed internal documents. Noted dates, amounts, and the accounts the money moved through. I told myself I was protecting myself. That if something criminal was happening inside that company and my name appeared on the finance records, I needed to prove I had no part in it. But deep down, I think I already suspected who was responsible. I was just not ready to say it out loud yet. That clarity would come, and when it did, it would change everything. It was a rainy October night 14 months before the Christmas dinner. I had stayed late at a restaurant waiting on a colleague who never showed. I was about to leave when I noticed a familiar silhouette at a corner booth near the back. Adrian. He was meeting 3 men I did not recognize. They were not friends. The body language was wrong for that. One man had a folder open on the table. Another was speaking in a low, tight voice with his finger pointed directly at Adrian's chest. I moved quietly to a seat behind a partition. The words came in broken pieces. Accounts. Timeline. Liability. And then one sentence that stopped me cold. One of the men said clearly, "If your father's fraud gets exposed, we are all finished." I stopped breathing. Fraud. So they knew. These men were connected to money that had moved out of the Hartwell Group. And they were furious, not because they had been cheated, but because they feared being exposed right alongside whoever took the money. I slipped out before Adrian could see me. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, trying to process what I had just heard. This was not sloppy bookkeeping. This was organized fraud with multiple people involved. And somehow Adrian was standing at the center of it. I drove home, added a new page to my private file, and started recording conversations. I bought a small digital recorder the next morning, the kind a careful journalist might carry. I kept it in a zippered pocket inside my handbag and made sure it was with me every time I was near Adrian or my father. For For 3 months, most recordings were ordinary. Meetings, family dinners, business calls I happened to be near. Then in January, 11 months before the Christmas dinner, I recorded something that changed everything. Adrian came to the office early on a Tuesday. He did not know I was in the back office reviewing vendor files. He walked straight into my father's private office and closed the door, but the walls in that building were old and thin. I turned on my recorder and held very still. My father's voice came first, tired, almost pleading. Adrian, we have talked about this. I cannot move that kind of money again without triggering an audit. Then Adrian, calm and flat. Then find another way. Because if I do not receive what I was promised, the story I know becomes very public very quickly. And we both know what that story does to your name. A long silence. My father again, barely a whisper. You are blackmailing your own father. Adrian said nothing. My hands were shaking when I stopped the recorder. This was not a father choosing a more deserving child. Adrian was holding my father hostage. But why? What gave him that kind of power? That question refused to leave me. I had been carrying half a truth for too long. I knew about the fraud. I knew about the blackmail. But I still did not understand what was at the root of it. What secret gave Adrian such power over my father? The Vail settlement. The $2.4 million. The date that did not match the adoption story. I turned those facts over in my mind constantly. Then one afternoon in March, 8 months before the Christmas dinner, I made a decision I had been circling for a long time. I ordered a DNA test. Not through a hospital, through a private laboratory that handled confidential family cases. I needed something with my father's DNA collected without his knowledge. I chose a coffee cup he had used during a family Sunday lunch, sealed it carefully, paired it with a sample of my own DNA, and paid extra for fast processing. The results arrived in a plain envelope 6 weeks later. I almost did not open it. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just holding the sealed envelope, aware that whatever was inside might change my understanding of everything. When I finally pulled the pages out, I read them once. Then I sat back. Then I read them again, because the results were not what I had expected at all. I had ordered that test to confirm Adrian was not connected to our family by blood. The numbers on that page told the complete opposite story, and I felt the room shift slowly around me. The DNA report was clean and precise. There was no room for misreading it. Adrian Vail and I were not strangers. We were not two unrelated people brought together by a generous adoption story. Adrian Vail was my father's biological son. Same father, different mother. My father had not adopted a struggling child out of the goodness of his heart. He had quietly brought his own secret son into our home. He had looked me in the eye for over 12 years and called it charity. I folded the report and placed it back in the envelope. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I expected tears. Instead, I felt something much colder. Clarity. Every piece that had confused me for years locked into place. The settlement payment before the adoption. My father's deep obsession with Adrian's success. The way he had slowly moved Adrian into every position of trust inside the company while pushing me out. My father had not been replacing a lost son. He had been protecting a secret one. And Adrian had grown up knowing the full truth about who he was. That was the weapon. That was the leverage. Adrian did not just know about the fraud. He knew about the affair. He was the living proof of it. And he had used that proof to demand everything my father had promised me. I placed the DNA report in the waterproof envelope alongside the settlement document. Then I called my mother. My mother, Olivia Hartwell, had always been a quiet woman. She had spent 50 years being my father's perfectly polished wife. Charity events, church committees, the kind of woman who smiled in photographs and never raised her voice above a gentle murmur. But when I called that afternoon and told her I had the DNA results, she did not ask what I meant. She simply said, "Come to the house." But come alone. I drove over that evening. My father was away on a business trip. We sat in the sunroom with the lights low and the garden dark outside. I placed the report on the table between us. My mother looked at it, but did not pick it up. Then her eyes filled with tears. "How long have you known?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "Since before he brought the boy home." The words hit me like a blow. She had known. She had sat at every dinner table. She had hugged Adrian at every Christmas. She had watched my father slowly erase me while knowing the entire truth. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Because your father made me a promise." I leaned forward. "What promise?" She wiped her eyes in that careful way she always did when fighting to hold herself together. He promised me that no matter what happened, the inheritance would always belong to you. I stared at her. And you believed him, I said. She looked at the dark garden. I did. My mother told me everything that night in the sunroom. Years before Adrian ever appeared at our door, my father had been deeply involved with a woman named Vera Vale. It was a long, quiet affair, partly funded through company accounts, which explained the early financial irregularities I could never fully trace. When Vera became pregnant, my father panicked. He could not risk the affair becoming public. His reputation, his business partnerships, his carefully polished family image. Everything would collapse if the truth came out. So he made two separate agreements. The first was with Vera, a financial settlement, $2.4 million, in exchange for her silence and her agreement to raise the child without the Hartwell name. The second was with my mother. My father came to Norma and confessed. Not out of guilt, out of strategy. He needed her to stay. He needed the family image intact. He told her the child, Adrian, was 7 years old and needed stability. He wanted to bring him home quietly, present him as an adopted son, and give him a proper life. In return, he promised my mother two things. First, that the affair was fully over. Second, that no matter how the business developed, I, Olivia, his biological daughter, would always be protected in the will. My mother agreed. She had no idea Adrian was growing up learning the full truth about his birth, or what he planned to do with it. Adrian found out the truth about his birth on his 25th birthday. My mother did not know exactly how. She suspected Vera had finally told him directly. Or perhaps he had found paperwork, the way I eventually did. Either way, from the moment he learned the truth, everything shifted. My mother noticed the change almost immediately. Adrian became quieter, more deliberate. He started requesting private meetings with my father. He showed more interest in the company finances than he ever had before. And my father grew visibly anxious every time Adrian entered a room. At the time, my mother believed it was simply a complicated adjustment between two people processing an unexpected truth. What was actually happening was far darker. Adrian had gone to my father with everything laid out. He knew about the affair. He knew about the settlement payment to his mother. He knew he had not been brought home out of generosity, but hidden away out of shame. And then he told my father precisely what he wanted in return for his silence. Not just money, not simply a title in the company. Everything. The full inheritance. Every property, every account, every piece of the Hartwell empire. He wanted it locked down legally before my father died. Otherwise, the entire story would become very public very quickly. My father, facing total destruction of his reputation, agreed. And the will was quietly, carefully rewritten. All of it finally made sense. I drove home from my mother's house in complete silence. Everything that had confused me for decades now had a clean, terrible logic. My father had not woken up one morning and decided I was undeserving. He had not discovered some deeper love for Adrian that outweighed 40 years of raising me. He had been cornered. Adrian had done the research. He had built his leverage deliberately and waited until the timing was exactly right. Then he had walked into my father's office with every card on the table. It was not love that had driven my father's decision. It was pure fear. And the Christmas dinner announcement had been Adrian's final move. By making it public in front of 32 people, he had locked my father in permanently. Any quiet reversal would require explanations. Any change risked the full story coming out. Adrian had been clever. I had to honestly admit that. He had read our family with precision and built a trap using my father's greatest weakness, his obsession with reputation, as the closing mechanism. But here was what Adrian had not accounted for. He was not the only one who had been quietly gathering evidence. He was not the only one in this family holding important documents. And the difference between us was significant. Adrian had leverage over one person, my father. I had leverage over both of them. Every fraud record, the settlement document, the DNA proof, the blackmail recording, all of it stored safely at home. I had been the patient one. Now it was time to move. The day after Christmas, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I did not eat. I barely touched my tea. I just sat with everything I now knew and let myself feel the full weight of it before deciding what to do. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I want to be clear about that. I did not want to hurt my father out of bitterness. I did not want to destroy Adrian simply because he had outmaneuvered me. But what happened at that Christmas dinner was not just about a will. My father had made the announcement in front of 32 people. He had laughed while the room mocked me. He had raised a glass to the son who was blackmailing him and turned his back on the daughter who had given him 40 years of loyalty. He had humiliated me deliberately. And Adrian had whispered that I was never meant to win because he genuinely believed it. Two people had spent years engineering my quiet erasure from my own family. I thought about my mother in that sunroom, eyes full of tears, staying silent for a decade to protect an agreement that was never honored. I thought about every year I had spent inside that company, believing my loyalty was building something real. None of it had ever truly been for me. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. First, a lawyer. Second, a financial investigator. Third, a journalist I had known and trusted for 15 years. It had begun. My lawyer was a woman named Patricia Cole. I had worked with her on a property matter 5 years earlier and trusted her completely. When I called the day after Christmas and asked for an urgent meeting, she cleared her schedule by the following morning. I brought everything. The settlement document from 10 years ago. The fraud records I had been building for 18 months. The DNA results. The recording of Adrian blackmailing my father. Patricia read through every page without speaking. When she finished, she set the documents down and folded her hands. "Olivia," she said carefully, "this is not a family disagreement." "I know," I said. "This is potential criminal fraud, tax evasion, and fully documented blackmail." "I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked what outcome I genuinely wanted. I thought honestly before answering. I did not want my father in prison. Despite everything, he was still my father. But I needed the truth told. I needed the fraud stopped. I needed the manipulation named clearly for what it was. And I needed the inheritance my father had promised my mother I would always receive. Patricia nodded slowly and reached for her notepad. "Then we do this carefully," she said. "We build the case completely before we move a single piece of it. If anything leaks too soon, they will shape the narrative before we can." I agreed. The quiet part of the plan had begun, and I had never been better at staying quiet. The financial investigator Patricia recommended was a man named Victor Osei. He was methodical, discreet, and had spent 20 years on corporate fraud cases before going independent. When I showed him what I had collected, he said it was one of the cleaner evidence trails he had ever seen. "Whoever built this understood accounting," he said. "But they got comfortable. Comfortable people leave gaps." He spent 6 weeks going through the Hartwell Group records. What he found went much further than I had realized. The duplicate vendor invoices I had noticed were only the surface. Beneath them was a full layered system of fake supplier accounts, each receiving payments for services never performed. The money moved from the company through those accounts and eventually into personal holding accounts connected to Adrian. The charity fund attached to the Hartwell Group was equally fraudulent. Large donations had been publicly accepted and used to fund high-profile appearances, while most charitable payments on record led back into the same fake vendor network. Then Victor found something I had missed entirely: a second set of financial accounts in my name. Someone had opened these accounts using my identification and linked them to one of the vendor entities. The amounts were small enough to go unnoticed in a routine review, but deliberate enough to ensure that if investigators ever looked, my name would appear directly inside the trail. They had not just frozen me out of the inheritance. They had been quietly building a plan to use me as the scapegoat. I had expected Adrian to fight back at some point. I had not expected it to happen so quickly. 2 weeks after I first contacted Victor, the rumors began. A social media account I did not recognize started posting carefully worded comments about the Hartwell Group's finances. The posts described a senior employee, never named directly, but described in terms that pointed clearly to me, who had been mismanaging company funds for years. Then a local business blog ran a piece quoting so-called industry insiders who claimed the Hartwell Group's financial records showed serious irregularities traced to a specific staff member. My name appeared in the comments section within hours. Former colleagues called to ask if I was all right. My aunt sent a message asking if the rumors she was hearing were true. Even my cousin, who had laughed at the Christmas table, reached out with a tone that said she had already decided what to believe. Adrian had moved first and moved fast. He was using the company's real fraud as a weapon pointed directly at me, knowing that as head of finance, I was the most natural person to blame for anything irregular in those records. I called Patricia immediately. She told me to stay completely silent. No public responses. No statements. No online arguments. Let him keep talking, she said. Every lie he puts on the record right now becomes part of the case against him. I held still and waited, but something had quietly shifted inside me. I was no longer afraid of what was coming. Patricia and I had agreed from the beginning that we would not release everything at once. Releasing the full picture too soon would give the other side time to prepare defenses and get ahead of the story. So we released one document, a single page, a copy of one fraudulent vendor invoice paired with the matching fake supplier registration. We sent it anonymously to a financial journalist named Nina Abra, who had spent 12 years covering white-collar crime. We made sure every detail on the page was fully verifiable. Nina published a short piece 48 hours later. She did not name the Hartwell Group in the headline, but the account numbers she referenced were specific enough that anyone inside the financial industry would know exactly who she was describing. The reaction came quickly. 2 institutional investors who held minority stakes in the Hartwell Group placed calls to the company's board that same afternoon. A bank that held the primary business credit line flagged the account for an internal review. Inside the Hartwell household, my father called an emergency meeting. I knew this because my mother, watching everything carefully from a distance, sent me a short text that evening. It read, "Franklin is frightened." That was the first moment since Christmas Eve that I felt something close to genuine relief. The machine had started running, and I knew from 40 years of working with numbers and systems that once something like this begins moving, it does not stop on its own. They had no idea what was still coming. My father called me directly 3 days after the article appeared. I answered on the second ring. I kept my voice completely even. He did not begin with an apology. He began with an accusation. He asked whether I was behind the leaked document. I told him I did not know what he was talking about. He said that if I was trying to damage the family business out of bitterness over the will, I was making a very serious mistake. I listened without interrupting until he finished. Then his voice shifted, dropped lower, became almost gentle. He said he understood I was hurt. He said the Christmas announcement could have been handled with more care. He said he was willing to discuss a financial arrangement, a one-time settlement, if I was willing to let the situation calm down. He was offering me money to disappear quietly. I felt a wave of sadness move through me when I heard those words. Not anger, real sadness. Because even now, at the very moment when he should have been asking how he had failed me as a father, he was still thinking entirely in transactions. Still calculating. Still managing. "Dad," I said quietly, "this is not about money." He paused. Then his voice hardened. "Then what exactly do you want?" "The truth," I said simply. "Just the truth. That is all I have ever wanted from you." He hung up. That evening I called Victor and asked him to accelerate the full timeline. And I told Nina Abra we would soon have much more to share. Late on a Tuesday night, 11 days after the first article published, my doorbell rang at 10:45. I checked the peephole. Adrian. He was alone. No driver. No companion. He stood in the cold wearing a dark coat, and his expression was carefully composed. But beneath the surface, I could see something I had never once seen on his face before. Tension. I opened the door but did not step back to let him in. "You have been busy," he said. "Have I?" I replied. He studied me for a moment. Then he smiled, but it was the smile of a man who had stopped finding anything genuinely amusing. "Walk this back, Olivia," he said. "Whatever you think you have is not worth what happens next. I know the right people. I know how to make stories disappear. And I know how to make new ones appear." He was threatening me. The same method he had used on my father. The same logic applied to a new target. I looked at him calmly. "Adrian," I said, keeping my voice very steady. "Do you remember the morning in January when you went to see Dad in his office and told him you would go public unless he gave you everything?" His expression shifted. Almost invisible. Almost. "That was a private conversation," he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "It was." I held his gaze for one more moment. "Good night, Adrian." I closed the door. Then I sent Patricia one message. "He came tonight. We move forward now." The recording I had made in January, Adrian's voice, calm and flat as he delivered his demands in my father's office, had been sitting in that waterproof envelope for nearly a year. I had listened to it exactly 3 times. The night I made it, the day I brought it to Patricia, and the morning Victor confirmed the audio was clean and legally usable. Patricia had been deliberate about when to deploy it. "This is your final piece," she told me early in the process. "You hold this for last because the moment it is released, everything accelerates and nothing slows down again." After Adrian's visit to my door, she agreed without hesitation that the moment had arrived. Victor assembled a complete evidence package. 37 pages of fraud documentation covering the fake vendor records, the fraudulent charity activity, the duplicate invoices, and the personal accounts opened fraudulently in my name as a false paper trail designed to implicate me. Attached was the settlement document from 10 years ago, the DNA report, and a professionally transcribed, time-stamped copy of the audio recording. Patricia submitted the complete package to financial crimes investigators and the relevant tax authority on a Thursday morning. Simultaneously, she sent a fully verified copy to Nina Abra. We also sent the recording to 3 additional journalists who covered corporate crime specifically, so no single outlet could be pressured into sitting on the story. By Thursday evening, Patricia called me. "The investigators have opened a formal inquiry," she said. "It is out of our hands now." I exhaled slowly. For the first time in months, I breathed. The story broke on a Friday morning. I woke early, made tea, and sat at my kitchen table with my phone face down in front of me. I had promised myself I would not watch it happen in real time. I lasted about 20 minutes. By 7 in the morning, Nina Abra's article was live under the headline, "Hartwell Group under investigation. Fraud allegations and hidden recordings emerge." Within 2 hours, it had been picked up by 4 other publications. By noon, it was the lead story on a national financial news channel. The recording alone was damning. Adrian's voice, calm and precise, telling my father that exposure was the price of failing to comply. But what truly broke the story wide open was the combination of everything together. The layered fraud was not a single incident. It was a system that had run for years. The fake charities, the phantom supplier accounts, money moving in careful, deliberate patterns month after month. And the accounts opened fraudulently in my name directly destroyed every piece of the smear campaign Adrian had run against me in the weeks before. My phone began ringing at 7:30. Former colleagues, family members, several of the people who had applauded at Christmas calling now with a very different tone. I did not answer a single call that day. I sat at my kitchen table, finished my tea, and let the truth do what it always does when given enough room. Move entirely on its own. The collapse came faster than I had expected, even knowing everything I did. Within 48 hours of the story breaking, 2 institutional investors formally withdrew from the Hartwell Group. Their legal team sent registered letters to the company's board citing breach of fiduciary duty and undisclosed financial risk. The bank holding the primary business credit line froze the account pending the investigation. 3 days later, a second institution placed the personal accounts connected to the Hartwell Group under formal review. The company's value dropped sharply. My father called me twice. I did not answer. My aunt called me once, crying, asking how I could do this to the family. I did not answer that either. Adrian, according to what Victor was hearing through his professional network, had gone into complete communications lockdown. No press statements. No public appearances. His lawyer had advised him to say absolutely nothing. The investigators moved quickly. Document requests went out to the company, the banks, and the lawyers who had handled the fake vendor registrations. My mother called me on the 4th evening after the story broke. Her voice was very calm. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "I am sorry it took this long." "So am I said quietly. We stayed on the line for a while after that, saying nothing in particular, just keeping each other company in the quiet. My father came to see me in person on the 8th day after the story broke. He arrived without calling. I saw his car pull into my driveway through the window. He sat in the car for several minutes before getting out. He looked older than he had at Christmas. The polished confidence I had watched him carry for 40 years was completely gone. He looked tired and pale, like a man who had spent a week taking inventory of every choice he had ever made. I opened the door before he could knock. We stood facing each other on the doorstep. I stepped back and let him inside. We sat in the living room. He did not start with excuses. That surprised me. "I know I cannot fix what I have done," he said. His voice was rough and low. "I know the will decision was wrong. I know what it was to stand in that room on Christmas and laugh while people mocked you. I was protecting myself. I used your dignity to protect myself." I listened without speaking. "I am sorry," he said. "I am truly sorry, Olivia." I thought about everything I might say in that moment. The years of hurt. The grief underneath the anger. "Too late," I told him quietly. "The truth is already moving. I cannot stop it even if I wanted to. But I hope you finally understand why I could not stay silent." He nodded once. He did not say another word. The formal charges came in the second month of the investigation. My father was charged with corporate fraud and tax evasion spanning 7 years. The charges covered the fake vendor network, the fraudulent charity accounts, and the undisclosed transfers used to conceal assets from official records. Adrian faced 3 separate charges. Fraud as a willing participant in the vendor scheme. Unlawful access to company funds through the accounts opened fraudulently in my name. And 1 count tied directly to the blackmail recording. Coercion, which in our jurisdiction carried significant weight. The day the charges were announced, my phone went quiet for the first time in weeks. No calls from relatives trying to manage the situation. No messages from cousins asking me to reconsider. The people who had been loudest at the Christmas table had all gone silent. I sat in Patricia's office that afternoon reviewing the formal documentation. She explained that my own fraudulent exposure had been fully addressed in the investigation findings. The evidence made clear I had been positioned as a backup scapegoat. That finding alone would have been significant on its own. But then Patricia slid a single document across the desk. I looked at it. It was a trust agreement. My father's signature was on it, and the beneficiary listed was my name. "This existed before the will was rewritten," Patricia said. "Adrian never knew about it." I stared at the page. "What is it?" I asked. "Read the asset list," she said. The trust document was 14 pages long. I read every word. My father had not completely surrendered to Adrian's demands. Beneath the public compliance, the Christmas dinner announcement, the rewritten will, the performance of choosing Adrian over me, there had been one quiet act of resistance. Years before Adrian made his threats, my father had placed a block of the Hartwell Group's founding shares into a private trust. Not a full majority, but a significant enough percentage that, depending on how the remaining assets were restructured after the fraud proceedings, it would constitute controlling interest. The trust had been established through a separate lawyer, not the family attorney who handled the will. It had been filed quietly and stored with a private records firm in another city. Adrian's legal team apparently never found it because it was registered under a holding name that did not directly reference the Hartwell Group. The sole beneficiary was me. Had always been me. My father had signed it 12 years ago, before the blackmail began, before the Christmas humiliation. Patricia believed he had set it up because some part of him had understood that Adrian's arrival carried a danger he could not fully counter. That he had wanted one protection he could not be pressured into reversing. In court, when the trust was entered as evidence, the entire room went still. Adrian's lawyer had no prior knowledge of it. Adrian looked directly at me from across the courtroom. For the very first time, his face showed absolutely nothing at all. The verdicts came in the 3rd month of proceedings. My father was convicted on 2 of the 3 fraud counts. The judge noted his full cooperation with investigators after charges were filed and his absence of any prior criminal record. His sentence included a substantial financial penalty, mandatory restitution to defrauded investors, and a permanent bar from serving in any corporate directorial role. He would not go to prison. I had not wanted him to. Adrian's outcome was different. He was convicted on all 3 counts. The blackmail recording left very little space for the defense to argue. His lawyer tried to frame the conversation as a heated family discussion rather than a criminal threat. The judge played the full recording in open court. The courtroom was completely silent throughout. At sentencing, the judge described Adrian's conduct as calculated, sustained over years, and specifically designed to exploit a family relationship for financial gain while positioning an innocent person, me, as a fraudulent liability to absorb blame if needed. Adrian received a custodial sentence. When the verdict was read, I did not feel triumphant. I felt the same thing I had felt standing at my door the night I closed it quietly in Adrian's face. Finished. The fake lifestyle was over. The polished image was done. The picture my father had built for decades had collapsed beneath the weight of everything he had tried to bury. And the woman the room had laughed at on Christmas Eve was the last one still standing. 2 weeks after the sentencing, Patricia called me into her office one final time. The trust had been formally validated in probate proceedings. My father had not contested it. When his own lawyers reviewed the document alongside the fraud investigation findings, they confirmed it had been established cleanly, well before any of the criminal activity was documented, and was therefore fully protected from the financial penalties attached to the fraud conviction. The founding shares were mine. But there was one more thing Patricia needed to show me. During the fraud investigation, the Hartwell Group's board had been restructured under court supervision. 2 directors had resigned. 3 investors had filed civil claims. The company remained operational, but under external administration while restructuring was completed. The board needed new leadership. And because of the trust shares, I held controlling interest. Patricia placed a formal document in front of me. A proposal from the remaining board members requesting that I step into the role of executive chair to oversee the complete restructuring. I looked at it for a long time. This was the company I had worked inside for years. The company I had been pushed out of while fraud was built around me. The company my father had publicly handed to the man who had been blackmailing him. I thought about the Christmas dinner, the laughter, the raised glass, Adrian's certain whisper. You were never meant to win. I picked up the pen. And I signed. There was no wave of triumph, just the clean weight of a pen on paper. And underneath it, a future that finally belonged to me. Spring came late that year. But it came. I remember sitting on my porch the morning after I officially stepped into the role of executive chair of the Hartwell Group. The garden was just beginning to show the first signs of color. Everything was cool and still. My phone had new messages waiting. Board members. Former colleagues. A handful of journalists wanting comments. Even a few relatives who had gone silent after Christmas and had now, apparently, rediscovered the ability to reach out. I left them all unread for a while. I thought about my mother, who had called the night before to say she was proud of me, who had spent a decade inside a silent agreement that cost her more than she ever admitted, and was now trying carefully to begin something different. I thought about my father, who had called from a number I did not recognize and said only 3 words before hanging up. I was wrong. I thought about Adrian, who had once whispered across a Christmas table that I was never meant to win, who had been brilliant and ruthless and, in the end, undone not by any single move I made, but by the patient, steady weight of accumulated truth. I had not set out to destroy anyone. I had set out for one thing only: the truth, told clearly, on the record. That was all. Everything else had followed entirely from that. I went inside, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The Hartwell Group had a future to rebuild. And so did I.